Hey guys, this is Goku, and today we're gonna be talking about how to play on the flop. You will learn what to do when you missed it completely, and you will also learn what to do when you hit the nuts. We'll talk about how to balance your range and how to make your play less predictable. So, let's get right into it. How to play on the flop? Well, since you're playing the base pre-flop, you shouldn't find yourself in very difficult situations too often. Let's first discuss the times that you will miss the flop completely. Imagine you have raised from middle position with ace-king and got called only by the big blind. The flop comes 8-5-9 with two hearts. The big blind checks to you. Most of the time in this spot, you should make the continuation bet of 50 to 70% of the pot to try and take it down right now. You will succeed most of the time. Obviously, sometimes he won't give up even if he only hits a 5, or he won't believe you and will try to bluff you out of the pot instead. If you get called or raised, you just give up on the hand or re-evaluate on later streets if your hand improves. Of course, checking back on the flop is also correct, and I think you should bet about 80% of the time and check about 20% of the time. You should note that if you're playing against more than one opponent in this spot, you should just check and fold if they bet. Let's look at a different scenario. You open the pot on the cutoff with Queen Jack off and get called by the button. The flop comes Ace-9-4 rainbow. Even though you're out of position in this spot, you should still make the continuation bet most of the time, because the button will miss the flop a lot of the times and you want to try and win this hand right now or give up. Now let's talk about the times when you do hit the flop. You raise on the button with pocket tens. The small blind calls and the flop comes 4-5-9 with two clubs. In this spot, you make a continuation bet 100% of the time, because you have an overpair to the board, which is a good hand, but any clubs, overcards or straight cards are a threat, because they could make your opponent's hand. If you get raised, well, then it gets tricky, because you need more information to make optimal decisions. You need to know what range of hands the small blind would raise in this spot, how he plays, and so on. If you get raised by an unknown but tight player in a situation like this, you should fold. If it's a very loose player though, it's profitable to move all in most cases. Let's go to another spot. You raise from early position with pocket fives and you get called by the cutoff and the big blind. The flop comes King 7-10 rainbow. The big blind checks. This is your usual spot when raising with pocket pairs. You will hit a set almost 12% of the time, so the remaining 88% of the time will look like this. Depending on your knowledge about the cutoff, you should make a continuation bet here at least 20% of the time. If you get raised, you fold, but making the continuation bet here some of the time makes your range more balanced and your play less easy to read for your opponent. For the last example, let's talk about playing draws. You raise with ace-king suited from middle position and you get called by the button. The flop comes 10-deuce-6 with two spades. You have a very strong draw now. I'll show you how your hand compares to some of the hands your opponent could have there. If he has ace-10, you have 46.6% to win the hand. If he has 10-9 or jack-10, you have almost 52%. Even if he has the nuts there, which is pocket tens, you still have about 25.6% to win the hand. So, without a doubt, you should make the continuation bet here, even though you're out of position. And I would stick to betting 80% of the time and check calling 20% of the time. We haven't yet talked about the times you hit a very strong hand on the flop. When you hit a set, a straight, or flush, or better, well, it's pretty straightforward. You make the continuation bet most of the time, because you want to build a big pot, but sometimes, depending on the situation and type of player you're against, you can also check to try and trap him and also balance your range. But make sure to only check on safe boards, ones that do not threaten your hand. You should also play like this with overpairs, top pair, top kicker, and two pair. We can sum it up with this. On the flop, you bet most of the time when your hand is very strong, when you miss it completely but are in position, when you hit a good hand but the board is wet, when you hit a good draw, when you feel your opponent is weak. On the flop you check most of the time, when you miss but are not heads up in the hand, when you have a marginal hand like King Jack in an Ace King Queen flop, when you have a draw and you want to try and hit it as cheaply as possible, when you feel your opponent is strong. Please remember that it's important to mix your play and sometimes check with the hand you should bet with and bet with the hand you should check with. It makes you way less predictable. Okay, so we've covered how you should play on the flop. You make the continuation bet most of the time, whether you connect it or not. You've learned that you should bet most of the time with all your good draws, very strong hands, medium strong hands on wet boards, and simply when you think your opponent is weak. You know that most of the time it is better to check when there are more players in the pot, when you have a weak draw, or simply when you have a marginal hand like a second pair or something. I've just realized we haven't talked about the times when you're not the pre-flop raiser but you're just calling. Well, if the flop is dry and you've hit a top pair with a good kicker or better, you should definitely check to let your opponent make the continuation bet. But sometimes you may also bet out. But make sure you're also betting out occasionally with your weak hands and weak draws so that your range is more balanced. When the flop is wet and you don't catch a good piece of it, just play check fold. And when you do hit a strong draw, top pair, top kicker or better, definitely play check call, sometimes bet out, and sometimes check raise. I realize it's a lot of information and it doesn't cover every single situation you may encounter, but you should just have this in your mind, and with experience you'll definitely get a good feel for it. Thank you so much for watching, and congratulations! You are now one step closer to becoming an awesome poker player. If you enjoyed this lesson, please share it with your friends, click the like button and subscribe for more future videos. You should know that it is very important that you put the knowledge you have acquired into practice. This course will teach you all you need to know in order to beat the small stakes games, but you gotta practice. You have to get comfortable playing poker. You have to learn these fundamentals by heart. I cannot stress this enough. You will only get better if you practice. even 15 minutes a day will do wonders for your game in the long term. So, have fun playing and I wish you all good luck. See you in the next lesson.